Welcome to video 3. Having just defined what a project's all about in the last video, we're going to move forward and look at the 7 factors a project manager has to juggle on every project. So let's get started. From the definition, all projects are constrained by the factors time, cost and quality. This is also referred to as the iron triangle, but I like to think of it as the project manager's mantra. Time, cost, quality. Time, cost, quality. Time, cost, quality. Every project manager is under pressure to deliver high quality at low cost, usually by midday yesterday. However, every project is a compromise between these three constraints. And the notion of an iron triangle is a reflection that each project should realistically focus on one of the constraints, as the link between that constraint and the others may be inflexible, just as iron is. If we illustrate this by considering a project to renovate your kitchen at home. If you want a high quality kitchen, cabinet makers, granite worktops, that's likely to cost a lot more money because of the workmanship in it, and also likely to take longer because, as I say, there's a lot of craftsmanship in that. If you wanted the kitchen done quickly, then it's likely that you wouldn't have time for the craftsman, so you might have to get a flat pack furniture and not granite worktops. And similarly, if your focus was you wanted a low cost kitchen because you had a limited budget, then the quality might suffer. Again, you might need some cheap flat pack or end of line stuff, end of line tiles. And in terms of time, you might have to delay your project until the January sales when you can get a good discount from the shops on that flat pack kitchen. So, as I say, it's very rare that you can hit all three because of this iron link between them and the inflexibility of that. It's also worth emphasising that the time constraint is a combination of both the amount of effort required to deliver the different tasks involved in finalising the project and also the elapsed time over which the project runs. The cost is obviously the cost of that time if you actually have to get people in and pay so much per hour or so much per day for the resources, as well as any other material costs that are necessary to produce and deliver the project. And the quality aspect is an interesting one in the sense that a lot of people hear the word quality and think of perfection, and the reality is that in a project situation, because of these compromises, the quality is really what's fit for purpose. What does good look like? What's good enough? And who is going to assess that what's being delivered actually meets that standard. And also referring back to the project management body of knowledge and the idea that the project manager has this toolkit of techniques. There's the sort of underlying processes and techniques of project management and making sure that they're being used in a consistent way to sort of manage the project properly and sort of govern the project properly. So that's the constraints of time, cost and quality. If we now extrude the triangle to form a pyramid, and we can add the fourth factor, which is scope. The definition of a project obviously was all centered around delivering something, and it's the scope that defines what that thing is. And that can be considered in two ways. You've got the hard scope, which is what's included in the project and what's excluded in the project, and it's important to be clear up front what's not included so that we don't waste time later on in the project arguing about that. But it's also the soft scope, which is because you're dealing with people, they have perceptions and expectations about what these outcomes might look like, and it's important, again linked to the quality, that we are very clear up front about what's good enough, what should be delivered and what shouldn't be delivered. And then extruding it once again, this time from the pyramid into the diamond, we get the fifth factor, which is stakeholders. And stakeholders encompass a lot of things. If you remember from the definition of the project, it's all about bringing together a group of people that haven't worked together to form some temporary organisational structure. So within that, there's the project team who will actually deliver the work, there's the management of that, the project manager, yourself, plus a whole sort of series of management above that who've perhaps sponsored the work. That whole all needs a sort of governance structure to make sure that the project is being managed and directed properly. and because the project is likely to deliver something, anybody that could be affected by what the project or delivers, whether that's for a positive or a negative stance, are potential stakeholders. They have an interest, a stake in the project, and that stake needs to be managed. Also, because the project team hasn't necessarily worked together before, it's important that all the roles and responsibilities and the ground rules for how everyone's going to work together are established in order to deliver the scope under the constraints of time, cost and quality. I interrupt this video with a brief timeout. We've covered the first 5 factors, and before continuing I wanted to talk about the link between project management and eggs. What link can there possibly be, I hear you ask? Well, let me explain. I was looking for a way of associating the 10 fundamentals we will be covering with an everyday item so it would be easier to remember. I chose an egg for a number of reasons which will hopefully become apparent over the rest of these videos. As a side information, in the UK in the 1950s, the Egg Marketing Board had an ad campaign with the slogan, "Go to work on an egg," based on the suggestion that having an egg for your breakfast is a good way to start the day. Since project managers will be using these 10 fundamentals every day they work on every project they work in, they can definitely be described as going to work on an egg. So let's get back to the main presentation and link what you've learned so far with these eggs. The first way that the analogy of an egg can be useful is to sort of slice the egg and take a cross section so you can see the yolk, the white and the shell. And the first 5 factors that we've just covered sit nicely within the yolk of the egg, as that's really sort of the key elements that a project manager would manage every project and have to think about on every project. The white of the egg completely supports the yolk, and from the definition of a project there's this idea that every project should have some sort of objective, some beneficial outcome, some capability that's going to be produced by the project. So that's where the white comes in. Then there's the shell of the egg, which represents the idea that project management is all about risk. There's a lot of uncertainty in pretty much every aspect of the definition of a project. We've already talked about the constraints of time, cost and quality and the compromise that that requires. We've got stakeholders who may be political, may be unsure about wanting to sign up to the scope, might not be clear about what their requirements really are. You've got resources in the project that haven't worked together, so there's this whole team building ethic of trying to work together to get the job done, but having this sort of team building, not familiar with how things are done. So all of that is risky, and the risk management aspect that every project manager has to deal with on a daily basis is understanding and managing these risks. Where assumptions are made to move things forward, that's a risk. Issues might come up on a daily basis that are a risk to the project. It might mean that something has to cost more or take longer, so that has to be managed closely. And changes to the project once the scope of the project's been agreed up front. As the project develops, it may well be that that scope changes slightly, and that has to be managed as well. A lot of the planning of a project involves estimating, and estimating is making assumptions. So again, there's a risk that those estimates aren't accurate, and that can have a massive impact on the outcome of the project. So there you have it. They're the 7 factors that every project manager has to deal with on every project, every day they work. And we've linked that to the egg. So we've got this idea that the yolk of the egg has the factors of time, cost, quality, scope and stakeholders. The white supports that yolk by defining the project's beneficial outcome, the objectives, and the shell reflects the risk, the 7th factor, which is critical to juggling all of these together in an effective way to actually deliver what's required. The next of the 3 videos will look at the constraint of time in a little bit more detail, and also come up with another way of using the egg analogy to help describe that. It's also worth noting that there's a couple of bonus videos on this site that may be of interest. We talked under stakeholders about project governance. There's a video that goes into a little bit more detail about that, and also under cost there's a video that looks at a sample sort of cost sheet for a project and the sorts of headings that might be useful to help a budget in the first place, but also keep track of costs over the life of the project. So check those out as well. See you on the next video.